One topic that really interests me is that of Taiwan and China and the situation there. I lived in Taiwan many, many years ago. I loved it. I had a great time. I learned about the history of Taiwan, why Taiwan exists, how the current state of democracy in Taiwan came to be, and why China wants to take Taiwan back. And not just for historical reasons, but also for military and economic reasons. Taiwan sits off of China's east coast, and as long as Taiwan is an independent country that isn't under China's influence and control, America can pose a threat to China on its eastern seaboard. So maintaining control or obtaining control of Taiwan and then maintaining control of Taiwan is a huge imperative for China from an economic point of view, beyond the whole kind of rhetoric they put out about Taiwan being an inalienable part of China and Taiwanese people being Chinese people and sort of the cultural connection. It's a topic that really interests me because the question is whether Taiwan can remain independent or whether it's going to get overtaken by China. Now, I'm less interested in the kind of the arguments that are pro-Taiwan because Taiwan's a democracy and it's a free country and therefore we should help defend it because it's free. To me, it really just comes down to military strength and capability. You can be a free country, you can not be a free country, but whether you get taken over by somebody ultimately comes down to the practicalities of the matter. So, as it stands, America helps Taiwan a lot with weapon systems, defense systems, and Taiwan has its own indigenous defense industry, but it pales in comparison to the level of firepower and military strength that China can bring to bear. And I think this is important because, to me, I think even though an amphibious attack is very, very difficult to conduct, at some point, China will probably have the ability to conduct such an attack. And because it's such an imperative for them to gain control over their eastern seaboard and of Taiwan, it's likely that they're going to attempt this at some point. Now, some people say that because it's so difficult to pull that off, they're more likely to go for political, economic means of coercing Taiwan into their sphere of influence. Now, I think they're going to do all three. I think ideally, because military adventures are always costly in human life, in money, in risk, in geopolitical ostracism, all kinds of things. So ideally, they don't have to do it, but I don't think they have a choice if they really want to take control over Taiwan. They don't have a choice because short of taking it over physically, economic coercion and political coercion just simply isn't going to be enough. The only other possible alternative would be a Taiwanese government that wants to join hands with China and wants China to take over, but I think that's extremely unlikely, especially given that this generation of Taiwanese people have no interest in being part of China. Maybe some older generations held out for that. But even in those cases, when we think about the KMT party, for them it was more about taking control of China because they saw themselves as the true leaders of China. That's why they called Taiwan Republic of China in the first place. It was like saying, we are the real China, they're not the real China. So I think overall, there's not really a desire in Taiwan to merge with China, and I don't see that changing for the future, especially given the increasingly anti-China rhetoric that's coming out from the West. And Taiwan is very much under the Western sphere of influence, so they're going to be influenced by that, despite China being their biggest trading partner. So going back to what I was saying, I think the only way China can really take over Taiwan is militarily. And at some point, they're going to give it a shot. That's my opinion. And the only way Taiwan can defend against it is if they have an extremely strong military and they really see themselves as a nation that has to be ready to fight. And they're taking steps in this direction, but I don't think they're doing nearly enough. And I don't think it's easy for them to do what they need to do to counter China. I mean, China is set to become a superpower, if it isn't one already. How do you defend against something like that? It's extremely difficult. So I have sympathy for the Taiwanese. They want to remain independent, and yet it's going to be really, really tough. And my prediction is that when push comes to shove, the US and the West will probably abandon Taiwan to China if the cost of defense becomes too high for them. I mean, in terms of whether they're going to need to commit troops, whether they're going to need to commit battleships, because they are going up against a formidable force. I should also add at this point that I've been to China as well a few times, and I love China. I had a great time there, but the reality is if you're living next door to someone who wants to come and take over, then you have to defend yourself against that. And if you can't defend yourself, well, then you're going to get taken over. This is what happens in history. It's not fair, it's not just, but it is what it is. So, on the whole, would I want Taiwan to be controlled by China and taken over completely? Not really, because they would lose some of the freedom that they have right now, which I think would make things less enjoyable. Although I think economically they'll probably benefit from it, because China will want to show the world how Taiwan being part of China is better for Taiwan in the long run. So overall, I think the status quo is what I'd like to see continue. And I think a lot of Taiwanese people would prefer that as well, to be honest, just the status quo.